She chose the king who couldn't love her, because a heart that feels nothing can't break yours. But when her hidden power began melting his frozen curse, love became a death sentence. This is the story of the girl 3 kings wanted, but only one could destroy. If you want to see how a rejected outcast becomes the queen who shattered an ancient curse, stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. The rejection happened in front of everyone. Elara Voss stood in the center of the ceremonial circle, her bare feet cold against the stone floor of the great hall. Around her, hundreds of pack members watched in silence, some with pity, most with barely concealed satisfaction. The bond marking was supposed to be sacred, private. But her mate, Darian Crow, had insisted on making it public. She should have known then. The silver cords wrapped around both their wrists glowed faintly in the dim light. Ancient magic, older than any living wolf, hummed between them. This was the moment when the bond would be sealed, when 2 souls would be tied together for life. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. She dreamed of this since she was old enough to understand what a mate was. Darian stood across from her, tall and broad-shouldered, his dark hair falling across his forehead. He was the son of the Beta family, destined for leadership. And somehow, impossibly, he was hers. Or so she'd thought. "Darian Crow," the elder intoned, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "Do you accept this bond? Do you claim Elara Voss as your mate, your equal, your soul's mirror?" Darian's jaw tightened. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he looked past Elara, his gaze finding someone in the crowd. Her sister. Elara's stomach dropped. "No," Darian said quietly. The word landed like a physical blow. Elara felt the silver cords around her wrist flare hot, then cold, then burn like ice. The bond magic recoiled, sensing the rejection, trying to understand what was happening. "What?" Elara's voice came out small, broken. The elder stepped forward, her ancient face creased with confusion. "This is irregular. The bond has already begun to form." "I don't care what's begun," Darian said, louder now. He finally looked at Elara, and there was nothing in his eyes. No warmth, no regret. "I reject this bond. I reject her." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone laughed, a short, sharp sound quickly smothered. Elara couldn't breathe. "Why?" Darian unwound the silver cord from his wrist with deliberate slowness. When it fell away, the magic snapped back toward Elara with enough force to make her stumble. Pain lanced through her chest, white-hot and vicious. The bond breaking felt like something vital being ripped out of her body. "Because you're weak," Darian said simply. "You've never shifted properly. Your wolf is barely there. I need a mate who can stand beside me, not one I have to carry." "That's not—" Elara started, but he cut her off. "And because I've found someone better." He turned and held out his hand. Elara watched, numb with shock, as her sister Saris stepped out of the crowd. She was everything Elara wasn't. Tall, graceful, her wolf strong and sure. Saris had always been the golden child, the one their parents bragged about, the one who could do no wrong. Saris took Darian's hand without hesitation. She didn't even glance at Elara. "I, Darian Crow, claim Saris Voss as my mate," he said, his voice ringing clear. "She is my equal, my choice." The elder looked like she wanted to object, but tradition was tradition. If a mate was rejected before the final vow, the bond could be transferred. It was rare, unthinkably cruel, but allowed. New silver cords appeared, wrapping around Darian and Saris. The magic accepted them instantly, glowing bright and warm. Nothing like the cold, reluctant flicker it had given Elara. Elara stood frozen, the broken bond still burning in her chest. Around her, the pack whispered. She heard her name, heard the words weak and useless, and always knew she wasn't good enough. Someone started clapping, then another. Soon the entire hall was applauding the new bond, celebrating Darian and Saris like this was exactly how it was supposed to go. Like Elara didn't exist. Her knees buckled. She hit the stone floor hard, the silver cord still tangled around her wrist, now dark and lifeless. The pain in her chest was unbearable, a gaping wound where the bond had tried to take root and failed. No one moved to help her. Elara looked up through blurred vision and met her sister's eyes. For just a second, Saris's perfect mask slipped. There was triumph there, satisfaction. She'd wanted this. They both had. Elara's vision started to fade at the edges, shock and pain dragging her down. The last thing she heard before darkness took her was the sound of celebration. Her pack, her family, cheering for the sister who had stolen everything. Sin. When Elara woke, she was alone. Not in the Great Hall anymore. Someone had moved her to a small room off the main corridor, barely more than a storage closet. She lay on a thin cot, her body aching like she'd been beaten. The broken bond still throbbed in her chest, a constant, vicious reminder. She sat up slowly, her head spinning. How long had she been unconscious? Hours? Days? The door creaked open. Elara tensed, but it was just Mira, one of the younger pack members. She carried a tray with water and bread, her expression carefully neutral. "You're awake," Mira said quietly. She set the tray down on the floor. There was no table, and backed toward the door. "Wait," Elira's voice was hoarse. "What happened after I—" "The bonding ceremony continued," Mira said, not meeting her eyes. "Darian and Ceres completed the ritual. They're mated now." She hesitated. "The Alpha wants to see you. When you're ready." When you're ready. Like there was any preparing for whatever came next. Mira left without another word. Elara forced herself to drink the water, though it tasted like ash. Her hands shook as she set the cup down. She could feel her wolf somewhere deep inside, whimpering and wounded. The bond breaking had hurt them both. She'd always known her wolf was weak. She'd shifted for the first time at 16, 3 years later than normal, and even then, it had been incomplete. A half shift, painful and unstable. While other wolves ran through the forest in powerful, sleek forms, Elara struggled to maintain even basic control. Her parents had been disappointed. Her sister had been embarrassed, and Darian had clearly decided she wasn't worth the effort. Elara stood on shaking legs. She couldn't hide in here forever. The walk to the Alpha's office felt endless. Pack members stopped talking when she passed, their eyes following her with expressions ranging from pity to contempt. Someone muttered "broken bond" behind her back, and someone else laughed. By the time she reached the heavy oak door, her hands were clenched into fists, nails digging into her palms. She knocked once. "Enter." Alpha Torin sat behind his desk, his gray hair and weathered face a testament to decades of leadership. He looked tired. And when he saw Elara, something like regret flickered across his features. "Sit," he said. Elara sat. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Outside the window, she could hear the sounds of the pack going about their day. Normal, like nothing had happened. "I'm sorry," Torin said finally. "What Darian did was unprecedented, cruel, but allowed," Elara said flatly. "Yes, allowed." He sighed, rubbing his face. "I can't force a bond, Elara. No one can. If he chose your sister, then I'm just collateral damage." Torin's expression hardened. "You're still pack. That hasn't changed." Except it had. They both knew it. A rejected mate was a mark of shame, proof that even the universe itself had found her wanting. She'd be an outcast, pitied and avoided. Her wolf was already weak. Now she'd be broken too. "I'm exiling you," Torin said quietly. The words hit like a second rejection. "What?" "Not permanently, and not as punishment." He leaned forward, his voice low. "Elara, staying here will destroy you. The pack won't let you forget. Darian won't let you forget. Every day you'll see him with your sister, and every day the bond scar will tear open again." He paused. "I'm giving you a chance to leave with your dignity intact. Go to the Northern Territories. Stay with the border packs for a year. Find your footing again." Elara stared at him. Exile disguised as mercy. She should have been angry, should have fought back, but she was so tired. "When?" she asked. 3 days. That gives you time to—" The door burst open. A young guard stumbled in, his face flushed. "Alpha, I'm sorry, but—" "This better be important," Torin growled. "It is." The guard swallowed hard. "There are 3 kings at the border. They're demanding entry." The room went silent. "What?" Torin stood slowly. "Which kingdom?" "All of them. the guard said, his voice shaking slightly. King Aldrich of the Golden Plains, King Theron of the Storm Coast, and King Cale of the Frozen North. He hesitated. They're saying they've come for the rejected mate. Elara's blood ran cold. Torrin's eyes snapped to her. What did you do? Nothing! Elara stood, her heart racing. I've never even met a king. How would... But the guard was already backing out of the room. They're entering the territory now. They'll be at the Great Hall within the hour. He fled. Torrin stared at Elara like she'd grown a second head. 3 Alpha Kings don't just show up for no reason. I didn't call them, Elara said desperately. I swear, I have no idea why they're here. Then we're about to find out. The Great Hall filled faster than Elara had ever seen. Word spread like wildfire. 3 kings, here, now. Every pack member who could walk crowded into the space, jostling for position. Elara was pushed to the side, pressed against the cold stone wall. She spotted Darian and Cerys near the front, her sister's hand possessively wrapped around his arm. Cerys looked radiant, glowing with the fresh bond. When she caught Elira's gaze, she smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. Elara looked away before the hatred could choke her. The massive doors swung open. The first king to enter was impossible to miss. King Aldrich of the Golden Plains stood well over 6 feet tall, his armor gleaming like molten gold in the torchlight. His hair was the color of wheat fields in summer, and his eyes were a sharp, predatory amber. Power rolled off him in waves, an alpha in every sense of the word. Behind him came King Theron of the Storm Coast. Where Aldrich was gold and light, Theron was shadow and danger. Dark hair, storm-gray eyes, and an expression that suggested he'd rather be fighting than talking. He moved like a blade, precise, controlled, deadly. And then the third king entered, and the temperature in the room dropped. King Cale Thorn of the Frozen North was tall and lean, his presence like winter itself. His hair was white blonde, his skin pale, and his eyes were the lightest blue Elara had ever seen, almost colorless. He wore no armor, just dark leather and fur, but he didn't need it. Everything about him screamed danger. He looked at the crowd with complete disinterest, his expression blank. No, not blank. Empty. Alpha Torrin stepped forward, bowing slightly. Kings, this is an unexpected honor. What brings you to our territory? King Aldrich smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. We're here for the rejected mate. The hall erupted in whispers. Cerys stepped forward, her chin high. I am the current mate of... Not you, King Theron said coldly. He didn't even look at her. The one who was rejected. Every eye in the room turned to Elara. She pressed herself harder against the wall, her mind racing. This couldn't be happening. Kings didn't come for broken wolves. They didn't come for failures. King Cale spoke for the first time, his voice quiet and utterly devoid of emotion. Elara Voss, step forward. It wasn't a request. Somehow, Elira's legs moved. She walked through the crowd on numb feet, feeling the weight of hundreds of stairs. When she reached the center of the hall, the same spot where she'd been rejected just days ago, she stopped. The 3 kings looked at her. King Aldrich's expression softened slightly. You're younger than I expected. And weaker, King Theron added, though there was something like curiosity in his tone. King Cale said nothing. He just studied her with those pale, empty eyes. I don't understand, Elara managed. Why are you here? King Aldrich exchanged a glance with Theron. Some silent communication passed between them. Then Aldrich spoke. Because you carry something rare, something valuable. I don't... Your bloodline, King Theron interrupted. It's old, older than most wolves remember. You have the ability to forge bonds, Elara. Not just mate bonds. Any bond. Between people, between kingdoms, between enemies. He paused. That's why your rejection was felt across 3 territories. The bond magic recognized what you are, even if you don't. Elara's head spun. That's impossible. I'm nobody. My wolf is barely... Your wolf is suppressed, Cale said flatly. Deliberately or not, you've been holding it back your entire life. Likely because you sensed what would happen if you didn't. His gaze never wavered. But we felt the rejection. We felt the bond break. And we know what you're capable of. This was insane. Elara looked at Alpha Tauren, desperate for him to intervene, to call this the mistake it clearly was. But Tauren looked just as shocked as she felt. "We've each come to offer you a choice," King Aldrich said. His voice was warm now, almost gentle. "Come with me to the Golden Plains. I can offer you wealth, status, a place of honor you'd want for nothing." "Come with me to the Storm Coast," King Theron said. "I can offer you strength, training, the chance to become who you're meant to be. No more hiding." Both offers hung in the air, tempting and terrifying in equal measure. Then King Kael stepped forward. "I offer you nothing," he said simply. The hall went silent. Elara stared at him. "What?" "I don't offer wealth. I don't offer honor or strength or comfort." Kael's expression remained completely neutral. "I offer truth. My kingdom is dying. My bloodline is cursed. If I ever feel love, true deep love, my heart will freeze and I will die." He paused. "I need a queen who can create bonds, strengthen my kingdom, and keep her distance. You will have power. You will have respect. But you will never have my love. I am incapable of it." Somewhere in the crowd, someone gasped. Elara couldn't look away from those cold, empty eyes. He wasn't lying. There was no deception there, no hidden agenda, just brutal, horrible honesty. "Why would I choose that?" she whispered. For the first time, something flickered in Kael's expression. Not quite emotion, but close. "Because a heart that feels nothing," he said quietly, "cannot betray you." The words landed like a blade between her ribs. Behind her, she heard Darian's voice, sharp with disbelief. "This is ridiculous. She's not worth 3 kings. I'll go with you," Elara said. The hall erupted. Voices shouting, people arguing. Alpha Tauren tried to restore order. Darian was yelling something about insanity, and Cerys looked like she'd been slapped. But Elara kept her eyes on King Kael. "I'll go with you," she repeated, louder this time. "To the frozen north." King Aldrich's face fell. King Theron looked grudgingly impressed. King Kael just nodded once, like he'd expected this all along. "Then it's done," he said. He turned and walked toward the door. No ceremony, no grand gesture. Just a king who'd gotten what he came for. Elara followed on shaking legs. Behind her, chaos reigned. She heard Alpha Tauren shouting for order, heard Darian's furious voice demanding an explanation, heard her sister scream something vicious and hateful. She didn't look back. At the door, King Kael paused. "We leave at dawn," he said without turning around. "Bring nothing. You won't need it." Then he was gone, disappearing into the night. Elara stood in the doorway, the cold wind biting at her skin. She'd just chosen a king who couldn't love her, a kingdom that was dying, and a future that promised nothing but ice. But at least it was her choice. For the first time in her life, she'd chosen something for herself. And as she walked back through the hall, head high, ignoring the stairs, Elara felt something shift deep inside. Her wolf, wounded and broken, stirred. Maybe they weren't as weak as everyone thought. Maybe they'd just been waiting for the right moment to wake up. But dawn came too quickly. Elara stood in her small room, staring at the few possessions she'd accumulated over the years. A worn leather journal, a necklace her mother had given her when she was 10, before disappointment had replaced affection, a jacket that didn't fit right but had been a gift from someone who'd cared once. "Bring nothing," Kael had said. She left it all. When she stepped outside, the courtyard was already filled with people. Not the whole pack this time, but enough. They'd come to watch her leave. Some curious, some satisfied to see her go. Darian and Cerys stood near the front, his arm around her waist. They looked perfect together, the ideal mated pair. Elara felt nothing as she walked past them. Well, almost nothing. "You're making a mistake," Darian called out. "He's going to get you killed." Elara stopped, turned. "You don't get to care about what happens to me anymore." "I never cared," he shot back. "But I also never thought you were stupid enough to throw your life away for, what, pride?" "Not pride," Elara said quietly. "Freedom." Cerys laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Freedom! You're going to die in the frozen north married to a man who doesn't feel anything. That's not freedom, sister. That's a tomb." "Better a tomb I chose," Elara said. Then a life where I'm second best. She walked away before Saris could respond. King Kale waited at the edge of the territory, mounted on a massive white horse that looked like it had been carved from ice. He didn't dismount, didn't offer to help, just watched as Elara approached. I don't know how to ride, she admitted. You'll learn. He held out one gloved hand. Or you'll walk. I don't care which. There was no malice in his voice, just fact. Elara took his hand. His grip was strong, effortless, as he pulled her up behind him. She had to wrap her arms around his waist to keep from falling, and even through the layers of leather and fur, she could feel how cold he was. Not normal cold, something deeper, wrong, the curse. Hold on, Kael said. Then he spurred the horse forward. They rode hard and fast, leaving the packlands behind. Elara looked back once, just once, and saw her former home disappearing into the distance. She didn't feel sad. She felt free. They rode for 3 days straight, stopping only when the horse needed rest. Kael barely spoke. When he did, it was purely functional. We stop here, or drink this, or sleep. Elara tried to start conversations, ask questions about the frozen north, about his kingdom, about what she'd be expected to do. He answered in single sentences, sometimes single words. By the 3rd day, she'd stopped trying. The landscape changed as they traveled north. Green forests gave way to rocky hills, then to sparse tundra. The temperature dropped steadily until Elira's breath came out in visible clouds and her fingers ached with cold, despite the gloves Kael had tossed to her without comment. On the 4th morning, she woke to find snow covering everything. We're here, Kael said. Elara sat up from where she'd been sleeping near the fire. Kael didn't sleep, or at least she'd never seen him try, and stared. The frozen north stretched before them, a vast expanse of white and ice. In the distance, she could see a massive structure rising from the frozen plain. A castle, all dark stone and sharp edges, like something carved from the heart of winter itself. That's your home? Elara asked. Our home, Kael corrected. You're queen now. Or you will be after the ceremony. What ceremony? The one where you bond to the kingdom. He started packing up the camp with mechanical efficiency. It's different from a mate bond, more permanent. Once you're tied to the land, you can't leave. Elara's stomach dropped. You didn't mention that. You didn't ask. He wasn't wrong. She'd been so focused on escaping her old life that she hadn't thought about what the new one would actually entail. What if I refuse? She asked carefully. Kael looked at her for the first time that morning. His pale eyes held no emotion, but there was something sharp in his gaze. Dangerous. Then you'll freeze to death within a day, he said simply. The kingdom doesn't tolerate outsiders. Only those bound to it can survive here long term. He turned back to the horse. You chose this, Elara. I gave you the truth. Now live with it. He was right. She had chosen this. And somehow, even knowing she'd be trapped, she still didn't regret it. They rode the final stretch in silence. As they got closer to the castle, Elara started to see signs of life. Small villages clustered together, people moving between buildings wrapped in heavy furs. Everyone stopped to stare as Kael passed, but no one spoke. No one waved. They just watched with blank, careful expressions, like they were afraid. The castle gates opened before they reached them, pulled by guards whose faces might as well have been carved from ice themselves. Inside, the courtyard was pristine, too pristine. No mud, no mess, just perfect white snow and dark stone. Kael dismounted and finally helped Elara down. Her legs nearly buckled after days of riding. Someone will show you to your quarters, he said. The bonding ceremony is tomorrow at dawn. Be ready. Wait. Elara started, but he was already walking away. A woman appeared at her elbow, silent as a ghost. She was older, her face weathered, her eyes the same pale blue as Kael's. She wore the colors of the castle, dark gray and white. This way, my queen, she said softly. I'm not queen yet, Elara muttered. The woman's expression didn't change. You will be. She led Elara through endless corridors, all stone and ice and cold, so much cold. Finally, they reached a set of double doors. The woman pushed them open to reveal a bedroom larger than Elira's entire home back in the Packlands. Everything was beautiful. and everything was freezing. "The king's chambers are through there," the woman said, pointing to a door on the far wall. "But he doesn't use them. He sleeps in the throne room when he sleeps at all." "Why?" "The curse," the woman said simply. "The closer he gets to feeling anything, the colder he becomes. The throne room is warded. It keeps the worst of it contained." She hesitated. "You should know. People here don't talk about the curse. Not openly. But we all know, and we're all waiting." "Waiting for what?" The woman met her eyes. "To see if you'll be the one who finally kills him." Then she left, closing the door behind her. Elara stood alone in the freezing bedroom, her heart pounding. What the hell had she gotten herself into? Elara didn't sleep that night. The cold was part of it, despite the furs piled on the bed, despite the fire burning in the hearth. The room felt like standing inside a glacier. But mostly it was the woman's words echoing in her head. "We're all waiting to see if you'll be the one who finally kills him." She paced the room until her feet ached, then stood at the window watching snow fall over the dark landscape. Somewhere in this frozen castle, Kael sat alone in a throne room, kept alive by wards and distance and the complete absence of feeling. What kind of life was that? What kind of curse turned love into a death sentence? When the first gray light of dawn crept across the horizon, someone knocked on her door. Not the older woman from yesterday. This was a younger girl, maybe 16, with the same pale eyes but warmer features. "It's time, my queen," she said quietly. "I'm here to prepare you." Elara wanted to argue that she wasn't queen yet, but exhaustion made her silent. She let the girl lead her to a bathing chamber where steam rose from a massive copper tub. The water was hot enough to make her skin pink, and for the first time since arriving, Elara felt warm. The girl, her name was Lyra, she offered shyly, washed Elira's hair and dressed her in layers of white and silver. The fabric was impossibly soft, warmer than anything Elara had ever worn. "The kingdom recognizes its own," Lyra explained as she fastened a heavy cloak around Elira's shoulders. "Once you're bonded, you won't feel the cold the same way. It becomes part of you. And if the bond fails," Lyra's hand stilled, "it won't. The land doesn't make mistakes." She hesitated. "But you should know, the bonding ceremony isn't like what you had before. It's not gentle. The kingdom will test you, see if you're strong enough to carry its weight." "What happens if I'm not?" "Then you die." Lyra said it matter-of-factly, like discussing the weather. "But you won't. King Kael chose you. He doesn't make mistakes either." Elara wasn't sure that was comforting. When she was ready, Lyra led her through the castle's maze of corridors. They passed servants who stopped and bowed, their expressions carefully blank. No one smiled. No one spoke unless spoken to. The whole place felt like a tomb. They emerged into a massive chamber carved entirely from ice. Elara's breath caught. Columns of frozen water rose toward a ceiling she couldn't see, and the floor beneath her feet was glass smooth and clear. Below it, she could see layers upon layers of ice stretching down into darkness. Kael stood in the center, waiting. He changed into formal attire, dark leather and fur trimmed with silver, a circlet of twisted metal resting on his white blonde hair. He looked like winter personified. Around the edges of the chamber, people gathered. Hundreds of them, maybe more. The entire court, Elara realized. All of them watching with those same careful, empty expressions. "Approach," Kael said. His voice echoed strangely in the ice chamber. Elara walked forward, her footsteps too loud. When she reached him, he held out his hand. She took it, and the cold of his skin bit even through her gloves. An old man stepped forward from the crowd, older than anyone Elara had seen, his face a map of wrinkles, his eyes clouded with age. He carried a staff carved from what looked like frozen lightning. "Elara Voss," he said, his voice surprisingly strong. "You stand before the frozen kingdom, seeking to bind yourself to land and people. Do you come willingly?" "I do," Elara said. Her voice only shook a little. "Do you understand that this bond cannot be broken? That you will carry the weight of every soul in this kingdom until death claims you?" She hadn't known that part, but she'd chosen this path, and turning back now would mean freezing to death in the wilderness. "I understand." The old man turned to Kael. "And you, King Kael Thorn, do you accept this woman as your queen, You're equal in rule, if not in heart? Something flickered across Kael's face. Too quick to read. I do, he said flatly. The old man struck his staff against the ice floor. The sound rang out like a bell, and suddenly the temperature dropped so fast Elara gasped. Frost spread across the walls, across the ceiling, across her skin. Then let the kingdom judge, the old man said. The floor beneath Elira's feet cracked. She had just enough time to see Kael's eyes widen, the first real expression she'd seen from him, before the ice gave way and she fell. Cold swallowed her whole. Not water, but something else. Pure winter, pure absence, the complete lack of warmth, or life, or hope. It filled her lungs, froze her thoughts, stopped her heart. She was dying. The kingdom was killing her. Then something grabbed her. Not a hand, not anything physical, but she felt it, massive and ancient and aware. The kingdom itself reaching into her chest, into her soul, searching. What are you? The voice wasn't words, just pure meaning pressed into her mind. What makes you worthy? Elara couldn't answer, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The presence pushed deeper, ripping through her memories. She felt it find the rejection, the broken bond, the humiliation. Felt it discover her weak wolf, her failures, every moment of inadequacy. Nothing, the kingdom decided. You are nothing. The cold tightened, started crushing her from the inside out. No, that wasn't right. She wasn't nothing. She'd survived the rejection. She'd walked away from everything she'd known. She'd chosen this, chosen to be here, chosen a king who promised her nothing but truth. She'd chosen herself. Deep inside, her wolf stirred. Not the weak, broken thing that had barely shifted. Something else. Something that had been sleeping, waiting, holding back because it knew, it had always known, what would happen when it woke. Elara stopped fighting the cold, stopped trying to resist. She let go. Her wolf surged forward, and for the first time in her life, the shift came naturally. Not a painful half change, but a complete transformation. She felt fur and fangs and claws, felt strength pour through her, felt power she'd never known she possessed. But more than that, she felt connections. Threads of magic spinning out from her in all directions, reaching toward every living thing in the kingdom. Not forcing bonds, not controlling, just offering, inviting, creating the possibility of connection where none existed before. The kingdom hesitated. Ah, it said. And now there was something like recognition in its voice. There you are. The cold retreated. The crushing pressure vanished, and suddenly Elara was being pushed upward through layers of ice and magic, back toward light and air. She burst through the floor, gasping, collapsing onto solid ground. Her shift reversed, leaving her shaking and soaked in freezing water, but alive. Kael was there, kneeling beside her. For a split second, his mask cracked. She saw concern, maybe even fear. Then it was gone. It's done, he said quietly. He helped her stand, his hand steady on her arm. You're bound now. Elara could feel it. The kingdom humming in her veins, a constant awareness of the land and the people. She could sense the weight of it, thousands of lives all pressing against her consciousness. And she could feel Kael. Not his emotions, he didn't seem to have those, but his presence, cold and steady and absolutely alone. The old man approached, smiling for the first time. The kingdom accepts. All hail Queen Elara of the frozen north. The court bowed as one. Still silent, still expressionless, but they bowed. Elara was too exhausted to feel triumphant. Kael led her out of the chamber, through corridors that now felt familiar in a strange, intrusive way. She could sense the castle around her, feel the ancient magic in its walls. Rest, Kael said when they reached her chambers. We'll discuss your duties tomorrow. He started to leave, but Elara caught his arm. Wait. He stopped. Looked at her hand on his sleeve, then at her face. That's never happened before, has it? Elara asked. The kingdom testing someone like that? No. Why me? Kael was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. Because you're dangerous. The kingdom needed to be sure you wouldn't destroy it. He paused. I told you. You can forge bonds, create connections. In the wrong hands, that power could tear a kingdom apart from the inside. And if I wanted to, Tear it apart. Then we'd already be dead. He pulled his arm free gently. The kingdom trusts you now. Don't make it regret that. He left before she could respond. Elara collapsed onto the bed, too tired to even remove her wet clothes. As sleep dragged her down, she felt the kingdom settling around her like a heavy blanket. She'd survived. She'd been tested and not found wanting. But the woman's words still echoed. We're all waiting to see if you'll be the one who finally kills him. The kingdom trusted her. But could she trust herself? The next week passed in a blur of lessons and obligations. Elara learned the castle's layout, memorized the names and faces of the court, studied the kingdom's laws and customs. Everything was efficient, structured, cold. No one was cruel. No one was even unkind. But no one was warm either. She barely saw Kyle. He attended formal dinners where they sat at opposite ends of a long table and exchanged maybe 3 sentences. During the day, he disappeared into council meetings or patrol inspections or whatever else a cursed king did to avoid his new wife. Elara should have been relieved. This was what she'd wanted, a marriage with no expectations, no emotions, no chance of being hurt again. But the isolation was suffocating. On the 8th day, she'd had enough. She found Kyle in the training yard, working through sword forms with mechanical precision. Snow fell around him, and he moved through it like a dancer, every strike perfect and completely emotionless. We need to talk, Elara said. He didn't stop. About? About what I'm actually supposed to do here. She crossed her arms. I'm queen now. The kingdom accepted me. But I have no duties, no responsibilities, nothing but sitting in that freezing castle, looking decorative. You wanted distance. He executed a particularly vicious strike against the practice dummy. I'm giving it to you. I wanted honesty. There's a difference. That made him pause. He lowered his sword and finally looked at her. What do you want, Elara? I want to know why you really brought me here. She stepped closer. You said you needed someone to strengthen the kingdom, create bonds, but you won't let me near anyone. You barely speak to me. So either you lied about what you needed, or you're too afraid to let me do it. For just a second, something dangerous flashed in his pale eyes. Afraid? He repeated quietly. Yes, afraid. Elara held her ground even though every instinct screamed at her to back away. The curse only triggers if you feel love, right? Well, you made it very clear you don't. So what are you actually afraid of? Kyle was silent for a long moment. Then he sheathed his sword with deliberate care. Come with me, he said. He led her deep into the castle, downstairs she hadn't known existed, through passages that grew colder and darker with every step. Finally, they reached a heavy iron door covered in glowing runes. This is the vault, Kyle said, where we keep the kingdom's secrets. He pressed his palm against the door. The runes flared bright, then the door swung open. Inside was a single room lined with shelves. Most held scrolls and books, but one shelf was different. It held hearts. Actual hearts preserved in ice, each one cracked and blackened. Elara's stomach turned. What is this? Every king in my bloodline for the last 300 years, Kyle said flatly. He walked to the nearest heart, touching the ice gently. My father fell in love with a woman from the southern territories. His heart froze in his chest during their wedding ceremony. He died in front of the entire court. He moved to the next. My grandfather loved his children too much. Froze when my uncle was killed in battle. Another heart. My great-grandfather loved this kingdom. Froze when a plague wiped out half the population, and he couldn't save them. Elara couldn't look away from the hearts, each one a life ended by the simple act of caring. The curse doesn't just trigger from romantic love, Kyle continued. His voice was still emotionless, but there was something underneath now. Something raw. Any deep feeling, any strong attachment, grief, devotion, even rage if it's intense enough. He turned to face her. So yes, I'm afraid. Not of love specifically, of feeling anything real. That's not living, Elara whispered. That's just existing. I know. He looked at the frozen hearts again. But it's the only way to survive. Elara stepped closer to him, close enough that she could see the frost clinging to his eyelashes, the ice forming on his breath. You brought me here because you thought I could strengthen the kingdom without touching you, create bonds with everyone else, connect people, make them loyal, all while you stay separate and safe. Yes. But you didn't account for one thing. What? I'm stubborn. Elara met his eyes. And I don't accept that this is the only way. There has to be a solution. A way to break the curse or work around it, or… There isn't. Kael cut her off sharply. Every generation has tried. Every king has searched. There is no solution. There's only survival, and that means staying alone. Then why did you even bother getting married? Elara demanded. Why not just rule alone? No queen, no complications. Because the kingdom is dying anyway, Kael said, and for the first time she heard actual emotion in his voice. Exhaustion, resignation. Every year the cold spreads farther, crops fail, people freeze. The curse isn't just in me, it's in the land itself, getting stronger with each generation. I thought if I found someone who could create bonds, strengthen connections between people, maybe they could hold the kingdom together when I eventually froze too. Elara stared at him. You brought me here to replace you. I brought you here to save them. He gestured vaguely upward, toward the castle and the people above. That's all that matters. Not me. Not us. Them. It should have made her angry. Should have felt like another rejection, another person using her for what she could do rather than who she was. But instead, Elara felt something else. Understanding. He wasn't cruel. He was tired. A man carrying the weight of a dying kingdom and a curse that made connection impossible, trying to find any way to save the people he couldn't let himself love. Okay, she said quietly. Kael frowned. Okay? I'll do it. I'll strengthen the bonds, connect the people, hold this kingdom together. She stepped even closer. But not so you can die alone in a throne room. I'm going to break your curse. That's impossible. You keep saying that, but the kingdom accepted me for a reason. Elara held up her hand, and without thinking about it, she called on her power. Threads of light appeared, spinning out from her fingers, bond magic, visible and alive. I can forge connections that shouldn't exist, create bonds where there's nothing. If anyone can find a way through this curse, it's me. Kael stared at the light dancing between her fingers. For just a moment his mask slipped completely. She saw wonder there, and fear, and something that might have been hope. Then he shuddered it all away. Don't, he said roughly. Don't give me hope. That's more dangerous than love. He turned and walked out of the vault, leaving Elara alone with the frozen hearts. She stood there for a long time, looking at the evidence of generations of tragedy. Then she made a decision. She was going to break this curse, even if it killed her, even if Kael fought her every step of the way. Because a man who'd given up everything to keep his people safe deserved better than this half-life. And because somewhere in the past week, despite the cold and the distance and the complete lack of affection, Elara had started to care about the broken king who couldn't care back, which meant she was already in danger. Over the next month, Elara threw herself into her role as queen. She visited every village in the kingdom, met with families, listened to problems. And everywhere she went, she used her power. Not obviously, not forcefully, just small touches, helping a mother bond more deeply with a struggling child, strengthening the connection between feuding neighbors, creating threads of loyalty between the people and the land. It was exhausting. Every bond she forged took something from her, left her drained and shaking. But it was working. She could feel it. The kingdom growing stronger, the people more connected, the creeping cold retreating inch by inch. The court noticed, started treating her with something almost like respect instead of wary distance. Even the servants began speaking to her freely, smiling occasionally. But Kael pulled further away. He attended fewer dinners, avoided her in the corridors. When they had to meet for formal occasions, he was polite and distant and completely unreachable. Elara noticed. You're scaring him, she said one evening while helping Elara dress for yet another council meeting. I'm helping his kingdom, Elara countered. Same thing. Elara fastened a necklace of ice blue crystals around Elara's throat. Every person you connect, every bond you strengthen, he feels it. The kingdom is part of him, remember? So when you make it better, when you give people hope, she trailed off. He starts to feel hope too, Elara finished, and that triggers the curse. Exactly. Lyra met her eyes in the mirror. You need to be careful. He's already colder than usual. I've seen frost forming on his skin during council meetings. Whatever you're doing, it's affecting him. Elira's stomach dropped. She'd been so focused on helping the kingdom that she hadn't considered the cost to Kael himself. That night's council meeting was tense. Elara sat in her designated seat, watching Kael preside over discussions of crop yields and trade routes. He looked tired. More than that, he looked like he was in pain, though his expression never changed. When the meeting finally ended, Elara followed him out. Kael, wait. Go to bed, Elara. I need to talk to you about... No. He didn't even slow down. Whatever you want to say, I don't want to hear it. She grabbed his arm, forcing him to stop. The moment her hand touched his sleeve, ice cracked across the fabric, spreading from the point of contact. Kael looked down at her hand, then at her face. His eyes were more colorless than ever, pale blue fading toward white. You're getting worse, Elara said, because of what I'm doing. The bonds I'm creating are saving this kingdom, Kael interrupted. So keep doing it. Not if it kills you. I was always going to die. He pulled his arm free carefully. At least this way, it means something. He walked away before she could argue. Elara stood in the empty corridor, her hands shaking. She could feel the kingdom humming around her, stronger than it had been a month ago, healthier, more alive. And she could feel Kael at the center of it, growing colder with every passing day. She was killing him. Slowly but surely, her attempts to help were triggering exactly what the curse fed on: connection, hope, the possibility of something better. She had two choices: stop creating bonds and watch the kingdom die, or continue and watch Kael die instead. Both options were unbearable, unless she found a third way. Elara spent the next week in the library, digging through every book and scroll about the curse. Most of it she already knew: the warning signs, the progression, the inevitable end. But buried in an old journal written by Kael's great-great-grandmother, she found something different: a theory. The curse feeds on suppressed emotion, the journal read in faded ink. Every king tries to feel nothing, and that very act of suppression gives the curse power. But what if the answer isn't absence of feeling? What if it's acceptance? The entry ended there, unfinished. Elara tracked down Lyra. What happened to Queen Isara, the one who wrote this? Lyra's expression shuddered. She tried to save her husband, convinced him to stop suppressing his emotions, to let himself feel. She paused. He froze solid in her arms. She threw herself from the tower 2 days later. So that theory had failed spectacularly. But something about it nagged at Elara. The idea that suppression fed the curse made sense. Kael spent every moment controlling himself, pushing down any hint of feeling. And the curse just kept getting stronger. What if the answer wasn't to feel nothing or feel everything, but to find some kind of balance? She needed to test it, but testing it on Kael was too dangerous. She needed to test it on herself. Late that night, Elara slipped out of the castle and walked into the frozen forest beyond. She'd been here before on her visits to the outer villages, but never alone. Never this deep. The cold was brutal. Even with her bond to the kingdom, the temperature bit through her furs. She kept walking until she couldn't see the castle anymore. Then she sat down in the snow and closed her eyes. She reached for her power, the bond magic that had been growing stronger every day. Usually she used it to connect other people, to create threads between souls. But now she turned it inward. She could feel the broken mate bond from Darien, still a scar on her heart. Could feel the new bond to the kingdom, vast and overwhelming. And underneath it all, she could feel something else, a thread that shouldn't exist, growing between her and Kael. It wasn't a mate bond, wasn't even friendship, not really. But it was there, a connection forming despite their best efforts to prevent it. That was the problem. Kael was so busy trying to feel nothing that he hadn't noticed he was already starting to care about the kingdom's improvement, about whether his people survived, maybe even about her, just a little. And that caring was killing him. Elara took a deep breath and did something reckless. She grabbed the thread connecting her to Kael and pulled. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming. Suddenly she could feel what he felt, not emotions exactly, but the echo of them. the constant effort of suppression, the bone-deep exhaustion, the cold that never went away. And underneath it all, terror, pure primal fear of what would happen if he ever let go. Elara gasped, nearly severing the connection, but she forced herself to hold on. "I'm not here to hurt you," she thought, pushing the message along the thread. "I'm here to help." For a moment, nothing. Then, "Get out of my head!" Kael's voice, sharp with panic. "Not until you listen." Elara pushed harder, letting her own emotions flow along the thread. Not trying to force anything, just being honest. "You're dying because you won't let yourself feel. But the curse isn't triggered by feeling, it's triggered by the fear of feeling. Every time you push something down, you feed it. You don't know what you're talking about. Then explain it to me." She softened her mental voice. "Help me understand." A long silence. Then, slowly, Kael stopped fighting. The thread between them stabilized, and Elara felt it, a flash of memory, not her own. A young boy watching his father die, ice spreading across the king's chest as he smiled at his son one last time. The weight of a crown placed on a child's head, years of learning to feel nothing, to want nothing, to be nothing but a vessel for duty, decades of being completely alone. "I'm sorry," Elara whispered. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be." Kael's voice was quieter now. "This is what I am, what I have to be." "No." Elara stood up, still holding the thread. "This is what the curse wants you to think. But I felt the truth just now. You're not emotionless. You're not empty. You're just scared." "Of course I'm scared." The thread flared hot, the first real emotion Elara had felt from him. "I watched my father die. My grandfather. Every man in my bloodline frozen solid because they dared to care about something. Why wouldn't I be terrified? Because fear is just another emotion," Elara said gently, "and you're already feeling it, which means the curse should have triggered by now." Silence. She could feel Kael thinking, processing. Then, "Where are you?" "The northern forest." "Why?" "Stay there. Don't move." The thread went quiet. Elara stood in the frozen darkness, her heart pounding. She'd just proven her theory. Kael could feel fear strong and sharp, without freezing, which meant the curse wasn't triggered by emotion itself. So what was the actual trigger? She didn't have long to wonder. Within minutes, she heard movement in the trees. Kael emerged from the darkness, his pale hair almost glowing in the moonlight. He looked furious. "What the hell were you thinking?" he demanded. "Reaching into my mind like that. You could have triggered the curse. You could have killed us both." "But I didn't." Elara stepped toward him. "You felt real fear just now, strong enough that I could sense it across the bond. And you're still standing." Kael opened his mouth, then closed it. His expression shifted from anger to confusion. "That's impossible." "Is it?" Elara moved closer. "Or have you been so busy trying not to feel anything that you never tested what actually triggers the curse?" "I watched my father feel love," Elara finished. "Deep, overwhelming love for your mother. That's what killed him. But you've been avoiding all emotions, not just love. What if the other feelings are safe?" Kael stared at her. In the moonlight, she could see frost forming on his skin, but it wasn't spreading. Just there, constant but stable. "You're suggesting I experiment with the curse that's killed every man in my family," he said slowly. "I'm suggesting we find out what actually kills them." Elara held up her hand, letting the bond magic shimmer between her fingers. "I can feel the connections, Kael. Can sense how the curse works. And I'm telling you, what you're doing isn't working. You're just dying slower." He was quiet for a long time. The wind picked up, swirling snow around them. "If you're wrong," he said finally, "I die, and the kingdom loses its king." "If I'm wrong, you were going to die anyway." Elara met his eyes. "But if I'm right, maybe you get to actually live." Kael looked at her like she was insane, like she was the most dangerous thing he'd ever encountered. Then slowly, he held out his hand. Elara took it. His skin was ice cold, but she didn't let go. "Small steps," she said. "We start with emotions you can control. Anger, frustration, fear, things you've already been feeling without realizing it. We test the boundaries carefully. And if it starts to freeze?" Then I sever the bond between us, and you go back to suppressing everything." She squeezed his hand gently. "But Kael, I don't think it will. I think the curse is more specific than anyone realized." He looked down at their joined hands. Frost crept across both their skin, but it didn't spread, just marked the point of contact. "This is insane," he said. "Probably. If you're wrong, the kingdom will need a new queen. Then you better make sure I'm not wrong." For the first time since she'd met him, Kael almost smiled. It was barely there, just the tiniest curve at the corner of his mouth. But it was real, and he didn't freeze. They stood in the snowy forest, hands clasped, both of them barely breathing, testing the curse, testing the theory, testing whether a man who'd spent his whole life afraid to feel anything might actually be able to survive it after all. The frost on their hands glowed faintly in the moonlight, but it didn't spread. They walked back to the castle in silence, still holding hands. Elara kept her awareness focused on the thread connecting them, monitoring every shift in Kael's emotional state. The frost remained stable, present, but not spreading. A good sign. Maybe. When they reached the courtyard, Kael finally pulled away. He studied his hand in the torchlight, examining the faint tracery of ice that had formed across his palm. "It's not getting worse," he said, more to himself than to her. "No, it's not." Elara flexed her own fingers, watching the frost fade from her skin now that contact was broken. "We should test it again tomorrow, in controlled conditions. See if we can establish clear boundaries." Kael looked at her then, really looked at her. "You understand what you're proposing. If this goes wrong, it won't. You can't know that." "I know that doing nothing guarantees you die." Elara crossed her arms. "At least this way we're trying." He stared at her for a long moment, and she watched something shift behind his pale eyes. Not emotion exactly, more like the space where emotion might eventually live. "Tomorrow," he agreed quietly. "We start tomorrow." Then he turned and walked into the castle, leaving Elara alone in the courtyard with her racing thoughts, and the growing certainty that she'd just committed to something far more dangerous than breaking a mate bond. She was gambling with a king's life, and her own. The next morning, Elara woke to find Lyra standing over her bed with an expression somewhere between impressed and terrified. "The whole castle is talking about it," Lyra said without preamble. "You and the king, alone in the forest, holding hands. People saw the frost and they're saying—" She stopped, choosing her words carefully. "They're saying you're either going to save him or kill him, and no one knows which." "Neither do I," Elara admitted, sitting up. Her head ached from the mental strain of maintaining that thread with Kael. "But we have to try." "Do you?" Lyra sat on the edge of the bed. "The kingdom is stronger than it's been in decades. You've done what he brought you here to do. You could stop now. Let him keep his distance, live out however many years he has left. And when he's gone, you'll still be queen. The bonds you've created will hold." It was logical, safe. Everything Elara had thought she wanted when she first chose this path. But the image of those frozen hearts in the vault wouldn't leave her mind. All those kings who'd died alone, terrified of their own feelings, never knowing there might be another way. "I can't just let him die," Elara said softly. "Even though he's not your mate? Even though he'll never love you?" "Especially because of that." Elara met Lyra's eyes. "No one should have to live like that. Afraid to feel anything, completely isolated. It's not living, it's just surviving. And I'm tired of people just surviving." Lyra was quiet for a moment, then she smiled sadly. "You're either very brave or very stupid." "Can't I be both?" That startled a laugh out of Lyra. "I suppose you can." She stood, brushing off her skirts. "Well, if you're determined to experiment with an ancient death curse, at least do it properly. The council is meeting this morning, and half of them think you've gone mad. You'll need to handle that before word spreads to the outer villages." Elira's stomach sank. She'd been so focused on Kael and the curse that she'd forgotten about the political implications. A queen publicly challenging the fundamental truth of the kingdom's tragedy would look like either brilliant innovation or dangerous insanity. The council chambers were already full when she arrived. 20 advisors, all older, all watching her with expressions ranging from concern to barely concealed hostility. Kael sat at the head of the table, his face its usual blank mask. Lord Cassian, the eldest advisor, stood as Elara entered. "Your Majesty, we're glad you could join us." The pause before glad spoke volumes. Elara took her seat across from Kyle. "I understand there are concerns about last night." "Concerns?" Lady Morgana, a sharp-faced woman who controlled most of the southern territories, leaned forward. "You took our king into the forest and deliberately triggered his curse. That's beyond concerning. It's treason." "I didn't trigger it," Elara said calmly. "That's the point. The king experienced strong emotion and didn't freeze, which suggests the curse operates differently than we've always assumed." The room erupted, voices talking over each other, some shouting, others hissing warnings. Elara caught fragments. "Dangerous, foolish, she'll kill him," before Kale slammed his hand on the table. The sound cracked through the chamber like breaking ice. Everyone fell silent. "Enough," Kale said quietly. His voice was cold enough to make frost form on the windows. "The queen is correct. I felt fear last night, strong enough that it should have triggered the curse. It didn't." He looked around the table. "Which means we need to reconsider everything we think we know." Lord Cassian's face had gone pale. "Your Majesty, with all due respect, your father—" "Felt love," Kyle interrupted. "Deep, romantic love. Not fear, not anger, not any of the other emotions I've experienced without consequence over the years." He paused. "I've been afraid before, many times, and I never froze, which means the trigger is specific. Or you were lucky," Lady Morgana snapped, "and the Queen's interference will end that luck." "Then let it end." Kale's expression was still blank, but his voice carried an edge Elara had never heard before. "I've spent 30 years barely living, trying to feel nothing, watching this kingdom slowly die around me because I was too terrified to care about it." He looked directly at Lady Morgana. "If there's even a chance the curse can be understood, controlled, then I'm taking it, with or without your approval." The silence that followed was absolute. Finally, Lord Cassian spoke, his voice shaking slightly. "And if you're wrong, if this kills you, then the kingdom has a queen strong enough to hold it together." Kyle glanced at Elara. "That's why I brought her here." Something warm unfurled in Elira's chest at those words. Not quite trust, but close. An acknowledgement that she wasn't just a tool or a replacement, but someone capable of standing beside him in this. The council meeting continued for another hour with advisors arguing and debating and ultimately getting nowhere. But Elara noticed that no one explicitly forbade the testing. They couldn't. Kyle was still king, and he'd made his position clear. When the meeting finally ended, Kyle caught her arm as she stood to leave. "The training yard," he said quietly. 1 hour. Bring your focus and nothing else." Then he was gone, leaving Elara with a knot of anticipation and dread in her stomach. The training yard was empty when she arrived, the packed snow pristine except for Kyle's footprints leading to the center. He stood waiting, no sword this time. Just him and the cold. "We're going to establish boundaries," he said without preamble. "Find the line between safe emotions and dangerous ones." "How?" "You're going to push me." He held out his hand. "Use that bond magic of yours. Make me feel things deliberately, and we'll see what happens." Elara stared at him. "That's insane. What if I push too hard?" "Then you pull back before I freeze solid." His pale eyes were steady. "You said you could sense the curse through the bond. Prove it." It was a challenge, and a terrifying amount of trust from a man who trusted no one. Elara took his hand. The connection snapped into place immediately, stronger than before. She could feel his carefully controlled state, not quite emotionless, but heavily suppressed, like a dam holding back a flood. "Start small," Kyle said. "Annoyance, frustration, things I feel regularly anyway." Elara closed her eyes and reached along the thread. She pulled up a memory. Darian's face when he rejected her, the casual cruelty in his voice. She let the anger from that moment flow through her and into Kyle. His hand tightened on hers. More. She pushed harder, added the humiliation of collapsing in front of the pack, the pain of the broken bond. Raw, bitter anger flooded through the connection. Kyle's breathing changed, became faster, but the frost on his skin remained stable. Keep going, he said through gritted teeth. Elara hesitated. This was already more emotion than she'd ever felt from him. Pushing further seemed reckless, but he'd asked her to. She dug deeper into her own memories, found the moment she'd seen Saris take her place. The betrayal, the rage, the desire to scream and break things, and make everyone hurt the way she'd been hurt. She channeled it all into Kael. His eyes flashed. For the first time she saw real emotion there, anger, sharp and bright and alive. The frost on his hand began to spread, creeping up his wrist. Elara, his voice was strained. She immediately pulled back, severing most of the connection. The frost stopped spreading, but didn't recede. They stood frozen, hands clasped, both breathing hard. That was the line, Kael said roughly. Right there. I felt it. The curse waking up, reaching for my heart. But it didn't take you. Elira's pulse hammered. You're still here, still breathing. Barely. He looked down at the frost covering his arm. Any more, and I would have frozen. But we know where the boundary is now. Elara couldn't keep the excitement from her voice. Anger is safe to a point, strong, but controlled. It's only when it becomes all-consuming that the curse activates. Kael flexed his frozen arm experimentally. The ice cracked and fell away, revealing unmarked skin beneath. So the trigger isn't just feeling, it's intensity. And maybe type. Elara released his hand reluctantly. We should test others, grief, joy, fear in different contexts. Not joy. Kael's voice turned cold. Joy is too close to happiness, which is too close to love. We don't test that. Then what about... A scream cut through the air. Both of them spun toward the sound. It had come from inside the castle, high and terrified. Kael was running before Elara could react, moving with inhuman speed toward the main entrance. She followed, her heart racing. They found chaos in the great hall. Servants fled in all directions while guards tried to maintain order. And in the center of it all, a woman Elara didn't recognize stood with a knife pressed to Lyra's throat. Finally, the woman said. She had dark hair and darker eyes, and something about her felt wrong. Off. I was wondering how long it would take to get your attention, King Kael. Kael stopped dead. Let her go. Oh, I don't think so. The woman smiled. It wasn't a nice expression. Not until we have a little chat about your new queen. Elara's blood ran cold. She started to step forward, but Kael's hand shot out, stopping her. What do you want? He asked. His voice was perfectly controlled, but Elara could feel his anger through their bond, carefully leashed but growing. I want to know why you're breaking the rules. The woman dragged Elara backward, keeping the knife steady. The curse has stood for 300 years. Every king plays his part, lives his half-life, dies alone. It's tradition. It's necessary. Necessary for what? Elara demanded. The woman's eyes shifted to her. For balance. The curse isn't a punishment, little queen. It's a lock, keeping something much worse contained. Kael's hand tightened on Elira's arm. You're lying. Am I? The woman tilted her head. Did you never wonder why the curse started exactly when it did? Why it targets your bloodline specifically? She smiled again. Your ancestor made a deal, power and immortality for his kingdom in exchange for one small price. His descendants would never know love. Would never form the kind of deep connections that might break the binding. What binding? Elara asked. The one keeping the old magic sealed away. The woman's expression turned almost pitying. The frozen kingdom sits on top of a wellspring of ancient power, the kind that could reshape the world. Your ancestor wanted to use it, but it was too wild, too dangerous. So he made a deal with forces you can't imagine. Locked the power away, and in return, his bloodline would be cursed to guard it, forever. Kael's face had gone absolutely white. That's impossible. Is it? Why do you think your kingdom is dying? The woman pressed the knife harder against Lyra's throat, drawing a thin line of blood. Every time a king gets close to breaking the curse, the wellspring responds. It starts to wake up. The cold spreads. The land dies. She paused. Your father didn't just freeze because he felt love. He froze because his love started to crack the binding. And the magic responded by killing him before he could break it completely. Elara felt like the ground had dropped out from under her. You're saying the curse is intentional, that it's supposed to keep them isolated. Exactly. The woman looked pleased. And you, little bond maker, are the greatest threat this kingdom has ever faced, because if you actually manage to teach him how to love without dying, if you break the binding, that ancient power will be unleashed, and it will consume everything. Then let it, Kael said flatly. The woman's smile faltered. What? Let it consume everything. Kael stepped forward, and ice spread across the floor from his feet. His control was slipping. Elara could feel it through the bond. Rage mixing with fear, mixing with something that might have been hope. I'm tired of sacrificing my life for an ancestor's mistake. Tired of watching my people suffer. If breaking this curse destroys the kingdom, then maybe the kingdom deserves to be destroyed. Kael, Elara started. No. But he cut her off, still advancing on the woman. I've given up everything, felt nothing, been nothing, all to maintain some ancient binding I didn't choose and don't want. The ice spread faster, climbing the walls. You want to keep me locked in this half-life? Then kill me now, because I'm done playing by rules that only serve to keep me alone. The woman's expression shifted to alarm. You don't know what you're unleashing. I don't care. And the rage Elara had carefully pushed into him during training surged back, but this time it was all his own. Years of suppressed anger, decades of forced isolation, a lifetime of fear, it all came flooding out at once. The frost on Kael's skin spread like wildfire. Ice cracked across his chest, racing toward his heart. The curse was activating. Elara didn't think. She lunged forward and grabbed Kael's hand, shoving every ounce of her power into the bond between them. Not trying to calm him, not trying to suppress the emotion. Instead, she grabbed hold of the curse itself. She felt it, ancient, vicious, and completely focused on Kael's heart. A magical construct designed to kill at the first sign of deep feeling. And it was strong. So much stronger than she'd expected. Elara poured her bond magic into the gap between the curse and Kael's heart, trying to create a buffer. The power resisted, pushing back, trying to get around her. The woman dropped Lyra and stumbled backward. What are you doing? You can't… Watch me, Elara gritted out. She could feel the curse adapting, searching for a way through her defenses. It was designed specifically for this bloodline, keyed to their emotional signatures. But she wasn't of this bloodline. Her magic was different. The curse couldn't touch her, but it could still kill Kael if she let it pass. Elara wove threads of bond magic around Kael's heart, creating a cage of light and connection. The curse slammed against it and pain exploded through her chest. She tasted blood, but the threads held. Kael's eyes were wide, the ice on his chest halting its spread. Elara, stop! You're going to kill yourself! Shut up and let me work! She gasped. The curse attacked again, and this time Elara understood its nature. It wasn't just designed to kill, it was designed to isolate, to sever connections, prevent bonds, keep the bloodline alone. Which meant her power, the ability to create and strengthen bonds, was its exact opposite. She stopped trying to block it. Instead, she reached through it, past it, and grabbed hold of Kael's heart directly. Then she flooded their bond with connection, not romantic, not forced, just pure recognition of one soul seeing another. The curse screamed. Elara felt it recoil, unable to process what she was doing. Its entire purpose was to prevent this kind of connection. But she was making it anyway, weaving threads directly into Kael's heart, anchoring him to her in a way the curse couldn't sever without destroying her too. And it couldn't destroy her. She wasn't the target, wasn't part of the binding. The curse had no defense against an outsider. The ice on Kael's chest shattered. He stumbled, catching himself against the wall, breathing hard. The frost receded from his skin, leaving him pale but alive. Elara collapsed to her knees, her vision swimming. That had taken everything she had. The woman stared at them, her face twisted with genuine fear. That's not possible. You can't just… The binding doesn't allow… The binding, Elara said through bloody lips, didn't account for me. Then the castle itself groaned, a deep resonant sound that came from below, from the very foundations. The floor cracked, the walls shuddered. No, the woman whispered. No, no, no. You broke it. You actually broke the binding. The ground split open. Elara grabbed Kael and rolled aside as a chasm appeared where they had been standing. And from the depths rose something ancient and terrible. a presence so vast and cold that it made the kingdom's winter feel like spring, the wellspring, the old magic, the thing the binding had been holding back for 300 years. It poured into the great hall like liquid darkness, freezing everything it touched. Guards fled screaming. The woman who'd threatened Elara tried to run, but the magic caught her, encased her in ice mid-step. And then it turned its attention to Kyle. Elara felt it recognize him, the last of the bloodline, the guardian, the lock. It reached for him with tendrils of pure power, trying to reclaim what had been stolen, trying to consume the one who'd kept it bound for so long. Kale stood frozen, not from the curse, but from sheer terror. This was the nightmare his ancestors had created, the price of their ambition finally come due. Elira's mind raced. She'd broken the curse, saved Kyle from freezing, but in doing so, she'd unleashed something far worse. The wellspring would kill everyone in the castle, maybe everyone in the kingdom, unless she gave it what it wanted. She looked at Kyle, at his pale face and wide eyes, at the man who'd brought her here expecting her to be his replacement and instead gotten someone stupid enough to care. Then she made her choice. Elara grabbed hold of every bond she'd created in the past months, every connection between people, every thread of loyalty and trust and community. She pulled them all together, wove them into a single massive construct of pure connection, and she offered it to the wellspring. The magic paused, curious. You want power, Elara thought at it. You want to reshape things, to connect and change and transform. I can give you that. Not through destruction, through this. She pushed the web of bonds toward it, showed it how people connected, how communities formed, how strength came not from isolation, but from being part of something larger. The wellspring had been locked away for centuries, alone in the darkness. It had forgotten what connection felt like. Elara reminded it. The ancient magic reached out tentatively, touching the bond she offered. And something shifted. The violent hunger faded, replaced by something almost like wonder. More, it whispered in her mind. I can give you more, Elara said out loud. I can connect this entire kingdom, make it alive in ways it hasn't been for generations. But you have to stop killing people. A pause. Then, show me. Elara took a shaking breath and opened herself completely. She let the wellspring flow through her, using her as a conduit, and together they wove bonds across the entire frozen kingdom. Not forced, not controlling, just offering connection where there had been none. Showing isolated people that they didn't have to be alone. Teaching a cursed land that winter didn't have to mean death. It was too much. The power burned through her more than any human should channel. Elara felt her body start to give out, felt herself beginning to freeze from the inside. But she held on, just a little longer. The wellspring completed its work and retreated, sinking back into the earth. But different now. Not locked away, not fighting to escape. Just resting. Connected to the kingdom through the bonds Elara had woven, part of the cycle instead of a prisoner beneath it. The great hall fell silent. Elara swayed, her vision going dark at the edges. She'd done it. Broken the curse, survived the wellspring, saved the kingdom, and she was dying. Kale caught her before she hit the ground. Elara, stay with me. She looked up at him and saw something she'd never seen before. Tears on his face. Real, genuine emotion breaking through decades of control. You're feeling, she whispered. I don't care. His voice cracked. I don't care about the curse or the binding or any of it. Just don't die. Please. Not planning to, Elara managed, though her body suggested otherwise. Kyle pressed his hand to her chest, right over her heart, and Elara felt it, warmth flowing from him into her. Not magic, just pure, desperate care from a man who'd forgotten how to feel and was now feeling everything at once. The freezing in her chest began to thaw. That's cheating, she mumbled. You're supposed to be the one dying. Then I'll die after you're safe. Kale's tears fell onto her face. I refuse to lose you after you just saved everyone. Elara wanted to tell him that was the most emotion she'd ever heard from him, that he should be careful, that the curse might still... But the curse was gone. She'd broken it. And now a king who'd spent his whole life too terrified to feel anything was crying over her like his heart might actually break. It was the most human thing she'd ever seen. The darkness pulled at her, demanding rest. Elara let it take her, trusting that when she woke up, if she woke up, things would be different. Everything would be different. Elara woke to sunlight. Real sunlight, not the pale gray wash that normally filtered through the frozen kingdom's perpetual clouds. She blinked against the brightness, her head pounding, her body feeling like she'd been trampled by horses. "Don't move," Kael's voice rough with exhaustion. She turned her head carefully and found him sitting beside the bed, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His hair was disheveled, frost still clinging to the ends, and his eyes were bloodshot. But they were focused entirely on her. "How long?" Elira's throat felt like sandpaper. 3 days. He reached for a cup of water, helped her drink. His hands were steady, but she could see the tremor he was trying to hide. "You've been unconscious for 3 days. The healers said—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "They said you might not wake up at all." Elara processed that. 3 days. The wellspring, the bonds, the massive surge of ancient magic through her body. She was lucky to be alive. "The kingdom?" she asked. "Changed." Kael set the cup down. "Everything's changed." He stood and pulled back the curtains fully. Elara struggled to sit up, ignoring the protest from her muscles, and stared. The view from her window had always been white, snow and ice stretching endlessly, but now patches of dark earth showed through. And beyond the castle walls she could see green, actual green, small shoots of grass pushing through the melting snow. "It started the moment you collapsed," Kael said quietly. The temperature rose. The eternal winter began to break. By the second day we had our first rainfall in living memory. He paused. "The wellspring isn't locked away anymore. It's part of the land now, feeding it instead of being sealed beneath it." Elara felt for the bonds she'd created and nearly gasped. They were still there, all of them, but stronger, deeper, and threaded through every single one was a touch of that ancient magic, sustaining them, making them permanent in a way her power alone never could have achieved. "The people?" she asked. "Confused, frightened. Some are celebrating, others think it's a trick." Kael sat back down, and for the first time she saw him hesitate. "And they all want to know what happened, what you did, what it means." "What did you tell them?" "The truth." He met her eyes. "That you broke a 300-year curse, stopped an ancient power from destroying us all, and probably saved my life in the process." His voice dropped. "And that I have no idea what happens next." There was vulnerability in that admission. The emotionless king she'd first met would never have said something like that out loud. "You're feeling things," Elara observed. "Too many things." Kael ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. Anger, fear, relief, gratitude. It's like 30 years of suppressed emotions all hitting at once. "I don't know how to process any of it." "That's normal. For someone who's been holding everything back, I cried," he interrupted. "Over you, in front of half the court. That's not normal for me. That's not—" He stopped, struggling. "I don't know how to be this person." Elara reached out and took his hand. The contact sent a warm pulse through their bond, and she felt his confusion, his fear, the overwhelming sensation of feeling everything for the first time. "You learn," she said simply. "One day at a time. And you stop being so hard on yourself for having emotions like a normal person." "I'm not normal. I'm a king who—" "You're a man," Elara cut him off, "who was cursed and isolated and told his whole life that feeling anything would kill him. But the curse is broken now. You survived. So stop punishing yourself for being alive." Kael stared at her. Then, slowly, something in his expression softened. Not much, but enough. "The council wants to see you," he said after a moment. "When you're strong enough. They have questions." "I bet they do." Elara tried to stand and immediately regretted it. Her legs buckled. Kael caught her before she fell, his arms solid and surprisingly warm. "You're not going anywhere today. The kingdom needs its queen to recover." He guided her back to the bed with a gentleness that seemed to surprise both of them. "Everything else can wait." But everything else couldn't wait, and they both knew it. Over the next 2 days, as Elara's strength slowly returned, reports flooded in. The temperature continued to rise. Snow that had been permanent for centuries was melting, revealing land that hadn't seen sun in generations. Rivers that had been frozen solid began to flow. And in the southern territories, farmers reported that seeds planted decades ago and assumed dead were suddenly sprouting. The kingdom was waking up. But with the awakening came chaos. Villages that had been isolated by impassable snow suddenly had access to their neighbors. Old disputes resurfaced. Territorial claims that had been frozen in time for years were suddenly relevant again. And the bonds Elara had created, meant to connect and strengthen, were also highlighting every crack and fracture in the kingdom's foundation. The outer provinces are demanding representation in court, Lord Cassian reported during an emergency council meeting. Elara was finally strong enough to attend, though she still tired easily. They say if the old rules no longer apply, then the old power structures shouldn't either. They're not wrong, Elara said. The council turned to stare at her. Lady Morgana's face was cold. You're suggesting we restructure the entire government in the middle of this upheaval? I'm suggesting we listen to people who've been voiceless for 300 years. Elara met her gaze steadily. The curse kept this kingdom frozen in more ways than one. Everything was about maintaining the status quo, keeping things locked in place so nothing could change. But it can change now. It has to. This is madness, another advisor muttered. We need stability, not revolution. We need both, Kael said quietly. The room fell silent. He stood, and Elara could see him struggling to find words, struggling to navigate emotions he'd never been allowed to express. My ancestors created a system designed to never change, Kael said, because change meant feeling, and feeling meant death. But that system was killing us anyway, just slower. The Queen is right. If we're going to survive this, we need to adapt. And if adaptation tears the kingdom apart, Lord Cassian asked, then we hold it together. Kael looked at Elara. That's what she does. That's what we brought her here to do. The weight of every eye in the room pressed down on her. They wanted answers, solutions, some kind of magic fix that would make the transition smooth and painless. Elara had no magic fixes to offer. I can strengthen the bonds between communities, she said carefully. Help people connect, build bridges where there were walls. But I can't force anyone to get along. I can't make old hatreds disappear. She paused. What I can do is create the space for people to choose connection over isolation. The rest is up to them. That's not enough, Lady Morgana said flatly. It's what we have. Elara stood, ignoring her trembling legs. The wellspring changed everything. We can either fight that change and tear ourselves apart, or we can adapt and become something better. But I can't do it alone, and neither can the king. We need all of you. She looked around the table, meeting each advisor's eyes in turn. You can keep clinging to the old ways and watch your influence crumble as the outer provinces demand change. Or you can help shape that change, be part of building whatever comes next. The silence stretched. Then Lord Cassian sighed heavily. What do you need from us? It was an agreement, but it was a start. Over the next week, Elara threw herself into the work of restructuring. She traveled to the outer provinces with Kael, listening to grievances that had festered for decades. She mediated disputes, forged connections between feuding families, and slowly began to weave a new web of bonds, not based on fear or obligation, but on genuine mutual interest. It was exhausting and frustrating, and sometimes it felt completely hopeless. But then she'd see small victories, a village that had been isolated for years opening trade with its neighbor. Families separated by impassable snow reuniting, children playing in the first spring rain they'd ever experienced. The kingdom was healing, slowly, painfully, imperfectly, but healing. And so was Kael. She watched him relearn how to be human, saw him smile for the first time, a real smile, not the cold curve of lips she'd seen before. Watched him argue passionately in council meetings instead of speaking in flat, emotionless tones. Observed him grieve properly when they received news that an elderly advisor had passed, letting himself feel the loss instead of pushing it down. He was still learning, still making mistakes, still sometimes retreating into old patterns when emotions became too much. But he was trying. One evening, after a particularly difficult negotiation with the Southern Territories, Elara found him in the library. He was reading through old journals, His fathers, his grandfathers, all the kings who'd died frozen and alone. Finding anything useful? She asked. Just sadness. Kael closed the journal gently. My father wrote about wanting to hold me, just once, without fear. But he was too afraid of what it might trigger. He paused. He died before he ever did. Elara sat beside him. I'm sorry. Don't be, it's just... Kael struggled with the words. I'm angry at him, for being afraid, for not trying harder, for letting the curse win. He looked at her. Is that wrong? To be angry at someone who is just trying to survive? No, Elara said softly. It's human. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Kael spoke again, his voice quieter. I felt it today. During the negotiation when that southern lord was being deliberately obtuse. He flexed his hand. For a second I wanted to freeze him, actually considered it. But you didn't. No, I didn't. He met her eyes. Because I remembered what you said about emotions being normal, about not punishing myself for feeling things. He paused. It helped. Something warm bloomed in Elira's chest. Not romantic love, not yet. But something close. Affection. Respect. The kind of connection that came from facing impossible odds together and somehow surviving. Their bond hummed between them, stronger than ever. The court is talking, Kael said after a moment. About us. They think we're... He stopped, seeming unsure how to continue. Falling in love? Elara supplied. Yes. He looked uncomfortable. Are we? It was such a blunt, awkward question that Elara almost laughed. I don't know. Maybe. Does it matter? It might kill me. The curse is broken. Is it? Kael's voice carried doubt. Or did you just redirect it? The wellspring is connected to everything now, including me. What if deep love triggers it again, just differently? Elara had wondered the same thing. The curse was gone, yes, but the magic that had powered it was still present, just integrated into the kingdom's foundation. She had no way of knowing what might happen if Kael truly fell in love. Then we're careful, she said. We take it slow, test the boundaries like we did before. And if there are no boundaries? If any kind of love is dangerous? Then we deal with it. Elara took his hand. Together. Because I'm not letting you go back to that half-life you were living before. Kael stared at their joined hands. No frost formed, no ice spread, just warmth and connection. I don't want to hurt you, he said quietly. I'm harder to hurt than I look. You died, Elara. You stopped breathing for almost a full minute after channeling the wellspring. His grip tightened. I felt you slip away through the bond, felt the moment your heart stopped, and He stopped, struggling. I can't feel that again. I won't survive it. This was the heart of it, Elara realized. Not fear of dying himself, but fear of losing her, of caring about someone and having to watch them suffer. You can't control everything, she said gently. Can't prevent all pain or loss. That's not how life works. I know, but you're scared. Because feeling things means they can hurt you. She squeezed his hand. I get it. I was rejected by my mate in front of my entire pack. I know what it feels like to care about someone and have them destroy you with it. Kael looked at her then, really looked at her. How did you survive it? I didn't at first. I collapsed, wanted to die. Couldn't see any way forward. Elara smiled sadly. But then a cold bastard of a king showed up and offered me a chance to start over. No expectations, no pressure, just truth. And look where that got you. Exactly where I want to be. She meant it. Despite everything, the pain, the danger, the near-death experiences, she wouldn't change her choice. You gave me freedom, Kael, even if you didn't mean to. You let me choose my own path. And you chose to save a dying kingdom and its emotionally stunted king. I chose to help someone who needed it, she paused, and maybe to prove that I'm not as worthless as everyone back home said I was. Kael's expression hardened. You were never worthless. Tell that to Darian, or Saris, or my parents, who looked at me like I was a mistake from the day I couldn't shift properly. They were wrong. His voice was fierce now, angry on her behalf. Your wolf is stronger than any of theirs. Your power is extraordinary, and you've accomplished more in 2 months than most rulers manage in a lifetime. Elara felt tears prick her eyes. She'd spent so long being told she wasn't enough. Hearing the opposite from someone who had no reason to lie felt overwhelming. Thank you, she whispered. They sat together in the quiet library as the sun set outside, casting long shadows across the floor, and Elara felt the bond between them settle into something solid, something that might eventually become love, but for now was simply partnership. Trust. Two broken people trying to build something better. The door burst open. Lyra stumbled in, her face flushed. Your Majesties, there's someone at the gates. Multiple someones. From the southern packs. Alira's stomach dropped. What? They're demanding entry, saying they have the right to see the rejected mate who's apparently become a queen. Lyra's eyes were wide. One of them claims to be your sister. Cale was on his feet immediately. Send them away. Wait. Elara stood more slowly, her heart pounding. What if this is a chance? A chance for what? For them to hurt you again? A chance to prove I don't need their approval anymore. Elara looked at him. I ran away, Kyle. Left without ever confronting what they did. Maybe it's time I faced them. You don't owe them anything. I know, but I owe myself closure. Kyle studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Fine, but I'm there with you. And if any of them so much as looks at you wrong, you'll be appropriately kingly and diplomatic, Elara finished. I was going to say I'd freeze them solid. That's actually less diplomatic. I never said I was good at this. Despite the tension, Elara almost smiled. 2 months ago, Kyle wouldn't have made that kind of joke. Wouldn't have been capable of the protective anger simmering just beneath his words. He was changing. They both were. The Southern Pack delegation waited in the Great Hall, and Alira's breath caught when she saw them. Darian stood at the front, looking older somehow. Saris beside him, her hand possessively on his arm. And behind them, a dozen pack members she recognized. They all stopped talking when she entered with Kyle. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Elara could feel their eyes on her, taking in the queen's attire, the crown of ice crystals woven into her hair, the casual way Kyle stood beside her. Finally, Darian spoke. So it's true. You actually married the Frozen King. I did. Elara kept her voice steady. Why are you here? We came to see if you were alive, Saris said. Her tone suggested she'd been hoping for the opposite. The rumors said you died breaking some ancient curse. Obviously, that was exaggerated. Obviously. Elara didn't miss the flash of disappointment on her sister's face. We also came to discuss the treaty, Darian continued. With the Frozen Kingdom suddenly thawing, trade routes that have been blocked for centuries are opening. Our Alpha wants to establish formal relations. So that's what this was. Not concern for her well-being, not remorse for how they'd treated her, just politics and profit. Elara felt Cale tense beside her, felt his anger through their bond. She touched his arm lightly, a silent request to let her handle this. You want to trade with us? She said carefully. The same kingdom you all mocked when I chose to come here. That was before, Darian started, before I proved I wasn't useless? Elira's voice was cold. Before I became valuable enough to matter? Saris flinched. Good. We were wrong, Darian said, though he didn't sound particularly apologetic. About the kingdom, about its potential. We're willing to negotiate terms. No, Kael said flatly. The delegation turned to stare at him. I'm sorry. Darian's tone was incredulous. No, Kael repeated. He stepped forward, and the temperature in the room dropped noticeably. You rejected my queen, humiliated her in front of your entire pack, and now you come here expecting trade agreements because suddenly we're worth your time? Ice crept across the floor from his feet. Get out of my kingdom. Your Majesty, with all due respect. You have no respect. Kael's voice was absolutely frigid. If you did, you would have come to apologize, not to negotiate. You would have acknowledged the pain you caused. Instead, you walked in here acting like Elara should be grateful for your attention. Elira's heart swelled. This was the king she'd helped create. capable of fierce emotion, of protective rage, of caring enough to defend someone. Kael, she said softly. It's okay. It's not okay. No. But I need to do this. She turned to face the delegation fully. You want a trade agreement? Fine. Here are my terms. You acknowledge publicly that you were wrong about me. You apologize, genuinely, for the rejection and the cruelty. And you tell everyone back home that the weak wolf they all mocked is now a queen who broke an unbreakable curse and saved an entire kingdom. Silence. Then Saris laughed. You can't be serious. Completely serious. Elara met her sister's eyes. I don't need your approval anymore. Don't need your acceptance. But if you want access to our resources, to our trade routes, to the power of a kingdom that's about to reshape the entire region, you'll give me the acknowledgement you should have given me from the start. That's extortion, Darian said. That's consequences. Elara smiled coldly. You taught me that rejection has a price. Now you get to pay it. The delegation looked at each other uncertainly. Clearly they'd expected a tearful reunion, or at least a submissive former pack member desperate for their approval. They'd gotten neither. We'll need to consult with our alpha, Darian said stiffly. You do that. Kael stepped forward, and his presence was overwhelming. King and predator, all at once. You have until dawn tomorrow to decide. After that, the offer expires and you're banned from our territory permanently. He turned and walked out without waiting for a response. Elara followed, her head high, refusing to look back. Behind her, she heard Saris hiss something to Darian, heard the pack members murmuring, but she didn't care. She'd faced them, stood her ground, and she'd won. When they were safely in the corridor, Elara let out a shaking breath. That was satisfying, Kael finished, watching them realize you're not the same broken girl they rejected. I wasn't going to say satisfying. What were you going to say? Terrifying. Elara leaned against the wall. I thought I'd feel more, anger or pain or something, but mostly I just felt empty, like they don't matter anymore. They don't. Kael stood close, not quite touching, but present, solid. You outgrew them the moment you chose to leave. Elara looked up at him. When did you get so wise about emotions? I have an excellent teacher. His lips quirked in what might have been a smile. She's stubborn and reckless and keeps almost dying, but she knows things about feelings. She sounds exhausting. Completely. This time it was definitely a smile. But worth it. Their eyes met, and Elara felt the bond between them pulse with warmth. Not love, not yet, but something that might become it, given time. The next morning, the delegation agreed to her terms. Darian stood before the court and formally acknowledged his error. Saris, looking like every word physically hurt her, apologized for her role in the rejection. And the pack members who'd witnessed Elira's humiliation now witnessed her triumph. It should have felt better than it did. Instead, Elara just felt tired. These people had shaped so much of her pain, and now they were just people, flawed and small and ultimately irrelevant to who she'd become. When the ceremony ended and the delegation left, Elara found herself back in the library. Kael joined her, carrying 2 cups of something that steamed. What is this? She asked. Tea. Allegedly. He sat beside her. The kitchens are still figuring out what to do now that we can grow things besides ice. Elara took a sip and immediately regretted it. This is terrible. I know. Kael drank his anyway. But it's warm, and it's not frozen, so I'm calling it progress. They sat together in comfortable silence, drinking awful tea and watching the sunset through the library windows. Outside, the kingdom continued its slow thaw. Inside, 2 people who'd been told they couldn't feel or connect or love were learning how to do all 3. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't smooth, but it was real. And for the first time in her life, Elara understood that real was better than perfect. Real is better than perfect, Elara repeated softly, letting the words settle. She set down her cup of terrible tea and looked at Kael. Do you believe that? He considered the question seriously, the way he approached everything now that he'd learned to think with feeling instead of just cold logic. I'm starting to. Outside, the last light of day painted the melting landscape in shades of gold and pink, colors the frozen kingdom hadn't seen in living memory. Everything was changing so fast, it sometimes felt like the ground itself might shift beneath their feet. 3 weeks passed in a blur of negotiations, restructuring, and what Lyra cheerfully called organized chaos. The outer provinces sent representatives. Trade agreements were drafted and redrafted, and slowly, painfully, the kingdom began to reshape itself into something that might actually survive its own transformation. But tension simmered beneath the surface. Not everyone welcomed the changes. Not everyone trusted the queen who'd broken the curse or the king who'd finally learned to feel. Elara felt it during court sessions. The sideways glances, the whispered conversations that stopped when she entered. Some saw her as a savior. Others saw her as a threat who'd destroyed centuries of tradition. And a small but vocal group blamed her for everything that was going wrong. The eastern villages are flooding, Lord Cassian reported during a council meeting. His face was drawn with exhaustion. The snowmelt is happening too fast. Homes that were built on frozen ground are sinking. We're sending supplies and engineers, Kael said. But it's not enough. We need more resources, more people, more of everything we don't have, Lady Morgana interrupted. Because the queen broke a system that, while harsh, at least kept things stable. The room went silent. Elara met Lady Morgana's hostile gaze. You're saying you preferred the curse? I'm saying 300 years of stability is worth more than a few months of chaos. Morgana stood, her voice sharp. Yes, the kingdom was frozen. Yes, we struggled, but we survived. We knew our place, our limits. Now, villages are flooding, territorial disputes are erupting, and you expect us to just adapt? I expect you to try, Elara said quietly. Why? Because you decided our old ways weren't good enough? Morgana's voice rose. You've been here less than half a year. You know nothing about our history, our sacrifices. I know you sacrificed your kings, Elara interrupted. Forced them to live half-lives, die alone, all to maintain a binding that was killing you anyway, just slower. That binding kept the wellspring contained. The wellspring that's now feeding the land instead of fighting it. Elara stood. Yes, there are problems. Yes, the transition is hard. But the alternative was watching this kingdom slowly freeze to death over the next century while pretending everything was fine. Morgana's hands clenched. You don't understand what you've unleashed. Then help me understand. Help me fix it. Elara's voice softened. I'm not your enemy, Lady Morgana. I'm trying to save the same kingdom you are. By destroying everything we built. By letting it evolve into what it should have been all along. The two women stared at each other across the table. Elara could feel the bond she'd created throughout the kingdom, could sense which way each person in the room was leaning. About half supported her, the other half was split between doubt and open hostility. This was the real battle. Not breaking the curse, that had been almost easy by comparison, but convincing people to choose hope over fear, change over stagnation. Kael's voice cut through the tension. Enough. We're not solving this by arguing. He looked around the table. The eastern villages need help immediately. Lord Cassian, organize relief efforts. Lady Morgana, I want you to lead them. Morgana's eyes widened. Your Majesty. You're right that the Queen doesn't fully understand our history, so teach her. Kael's tone left no room for argument. Go to the flooded villages, see what's needed. Report back with solutions, not just complaints. If you truly want to save this kingdom, prove it. It was a challenge and an olive branch at the same time. Morgana could refuse and cement herself as an obstructionist, or she could accept and actually contribute. After a long moment, she bowed stiffly. As you command. The meeting dissolved into logistics and planning. Elara caught Kael's eye across the room and saw the exhaustion there. Leading with emotion was harder than ruling without it. Every decision carried weight now, consequences he could actually feel. That night, she found him in the throne room. Not sitting on the throne, but standing at the window, looking out at the transformed landscape. You handled that well, Elara said. I wanted to freeze her. Kael didn't turn around. For talking to you like that? For questioning everything you've sacrificed. But you didn't. No, I channeled it into something productive instead. He glanced at her. You'd be proud. Very healthy emotional management. I am proud. Elara joined him at the window. But you look exhausted. I am exhausted. He rubbed his face. I keep waiting for the curse to come back. Every time I feel something strongly, I expect the ice to start spreading. It doesn't, but the fear is still there. That's normal. You spent your whole life believing emotion would kill you, and now I don't know what will kill me instead. Kale turned to face her fully. Before, the rules were clear. Don't feel, don't connect, survive. Now? I don't know where the boundaries are. Don't know if it's safe to... He stopped. Safe to what? He looked at her for a long moment. Safe to care about you the way I'm starting to. Elira's heart skipped. Kale, I know, it's too soon, too complicated. We have a kingdom to save, and I'm still figuring out basic emotions. He smiled slightly. But I wanted you to know that you're not just my queen or my partner in keeping this place together. You're, he struggled with the words, important. To me. Specifically. It wasn't a declaration of love, wasn't even particularly romantic. But coming from a man who 3 months ago couldn't admit to feeling anything, it was everything. You're important to me too, Elara said softly, even when you're being a cold bastard. Especially when I'm being a cold bastard, Kael corrected. That's when you like me most. True. They stood together in the quiet throne room, and Elara felt the bond between them settle into something deeper. Not love yet, but definitely heading that direction. The question was whether they'd survive long enough to get there. The answer came sooner than expected. 2 days later, Elara was visiting the eastern villages with Morgana. An uncomfortable alliance, but a necessary one, when the attack came. She didn't see them at first, just felt a sudden surge of wrongness through her bond network. A ripping sensation, like someone was trying to tear the connections apart. Something's wrong, she said. Morgana looked up from the supply manifest. What? The explosion cut her off. Fire erupted from the center of the village, and Elara felt bonds snap as people died. Not natural deaths, violent ones. She ran toward the flames before Morgana could stop her. The scene was chaos, buildings burning, people screaming, and in the center of it all, wolves. But not from any pack, Elara recognized. These were wrong, twisted somehow, their eyes glowing with the same dark energy she'd felt from the wellspring before she'd tamed it. What are they? Someone screamed. Elara knew. She could feel it through her connection to the kingdom's magic. These were people who'd been touched by the wellspring's power before she'd integrated it. They'd absorbed the raw, untamed version, and it had corrupted them. She'd done this. Her attempt to save the kingdom had created these things. One of the corrupted wolves lunged at a fleeing villager. Elara threw out her hand instinctively, and bond magic flared. She grabbed the creature's mind, trying to reach whatever humanity remained. There was nothing. Just hunger and rage and the screaming need to destroy. She severed her connection before it could pull her down with it. We need to evacuate, Morgana shouted, suddenly beside her. Get everyone to the northern ridge. They'll just follow. Elara scanned the chaos, her mind racing. We need to contain them, keep them away from the other villages. How? Good question. Elara reached for her bond magic, feeling the network of connections throughout the kingdom. She could sense Kael in the castle, could feel his alarm as he realized something was wrong, could sense the wellspring beneath everything, powerful and ancient, and now partly responsible for this disaster. She'd integrated it into the kingdom, made it part of the land's magic, which meant she could use it. I need you to get everyone out, Elara said to Morgana. Everyone, right now. What are you going to do? Something really stupid. Elara didn't wait for a response. She ran toward the center of the burning village, toward the corrupted wolves. Behind her, she heard Morgana screaming orders, organizing the evacuation. But Elara's focus was entirely on the creatures in front of her. There were 7 of them, 7 people who'd been warped by magic they couldn't control, turned into monsters by the same power that was supposed to save the kingdom. Elara's fault. Her responsibility to fix. She reached deep into the earth, past the soil and rock, down to where the wellspring pulsed with ancient magic, and she pulled. Power flooded into her, vast and overwhelming. The same force that had nearly killed her the first time, now answering her call because she'd integrated it into the kingdom's foundation. The corrupted wolves felt it too. They turned toward her as one, recognizing a threat. Come on, Elara said quietly. Come get me. They charged. Elara didn't run. She planted her feet and let the wellspring's power flow through her, shaping it into something new. Not destruction, connection. She reached into each corrupted wolf and found the broken bonds inside them. The places where the dark magic had severed their humanity, isolated them from everything they'd once been. And she started rebuilding. It was like trying to knit with broken glass. Every connection she forged cut into her, sharp and vicious. The corrupted magic fought her, tried to reject the bonds, tried to destroy her for daring to interfere. But Elara held on. She wove threads between the wolves and the earth, anchoring them. Created connections to the people they'd once been, to memories and feelings the corruption had buried. Built bridges where there had been only darkness. One by one, the wolves began to change. The dark glow faded from their eyes. The twisted wrongness smoothed out. They collapsed, shifting back to human form. 6 down, 1 to go. The last wolf was stronger, angrier. It lunged at Elara, jaws open, and she barely managed to dodge. Her concentration broke. The wellspring's power surged, no longer controlled, and pain exploded through her chest. Too much. She'd pulled too much power, held it too long. The wolf circled, preparing another attack. Then ice exploded from the ground between them. Kale appeared, frost spreading from his feet, his eyes blazing with fury and fear. Get away from her! He'd ridden hard from the castle. Elara could feel his exhaustion through their bond, but also his determination. He'd felt her distress and come running. The corrupted wolf turned toward this new threat. Kael, don't! Elara started, but he was already moving. He didn't use a weapon, didn't need one. Ice formed in his hands, shaped by emotion and ancient magic, and when he struck the wolf, it froze solid. Not dead, just contained. The wolf's human consciousness flickered inside the ice prison. Elara reached for it, weaving one last bond, anchoring this person to their humanity. The dark glow faded. Kyle shattered the ice carefully, catching the unconscious human before they hit the ground. Then he turned to Elara, and the fury in his eyes was terrifying. What were you thinking? I was thinking I needed to fix my mistake. By nearly getting yourself killed? He set the unconscious person down and stalked toward her. You pulled from the wellspring again. I felt it. You could have died. I didn't. You could have. His voice cracked. Do you have any idea what it felt like, sensing your distress and being too far away to help? Feeling you pour all that power through yourself and knowing you might not survive it. Elara stared at him. His hands were shaking. Ice crept across his skin, but not from the curse, from pure, overwhelming emotion. I'm sorry, she said softly, but I had to stop them. They were my responsibility, but they were our responsibility. Kale stepped closer. You keep trying to carry everything alone. Fix every problem, save every person, shoulder all the blame when things go wrong. He grabbed her shoulders, his grip firm but careful. You're not alone anymore. Stop acting like you are. The words hit harder than Elara expected, because he was right. She'd been operating the same way she had back in her pack, trying to prove her worth by being useful, by fixing things, by never asking for help. I don't know how else to be, she admitted. Learn. Kael's voice softened. The same way I'm learning to feel things. We figure it out together. Around them, the village was a wreck. 7 people lay unconscious, slowly recovering from their corruption. Buildings smoldered, and Morgana was organizing survivors with surprising efficiency. But in the center of it all, 2 people stood holding each other up. A queen learning to share her burdens, and a king learning to shoulder them. Slowly, Elara nodded. Together. The aftermath was brutal. More cases of corruption appeared across the kingdom. People who'd been touched by the wellspring's raw magic and transformed. Each one had to be contained, healed, reconnected to their humanity. It took 3 weeks of constant work. Elara pushed herself to exhaustion every day, and every night Kyle forced her to stop before she collapsed. They developed a rhythm, her healing, him containing, both of them protecting each other. The kingdom watched, saw their queen putting herself in danger repeatedly to save people who often blamed her for the danger in the first place. Saw their king feeling genuine emotion, showing actual care. Opinions began to shift. I was wrong about her, Elara overheard a villager say. She could have run, could have let us deal with the corrupted ourselves, but she keeps coming back. The king, too, another added. Did you see him freeze that wolf to save her? That's not the cold bastard we've feared for years. Not everyone changed their minds. Some still blamed Elara for breaking the curse. Some thought Kael was weak for showing emotion. But enough people shifted that the balance tipped. When the last corrupted person was healed and the immediate crisis passed, the council called an emergency session. Elara dragged herself to the meeting, exhausted and still healing from channeling too much power. She expected more blame, more accusations. Instead, Lord Cassian stood and bowed. Your Majesty, the Council wishes to formally acknowledge your efforts in containing the corruption crisis. Elara blinked. What? You risked your life repeatedly, saved hundreds of people, fixed a problem that, while partially of your making, was ultimately caused by centuries of magical imbalance. He straightened. We were wrong to question your dedication to this kingdom. Even Lady Morgana stood, though she looked like it physically pained her. I still think your methods are reckless, but I can't deny the results. You saved my life in that first village, and you've saved countless others since. It wasn't quite an apology, but for Morgana, it was close. Elara felt tears prick her eyes. She'd spent so long being told she was wrong, inadequate, a mistake. Hearing formal acknowledgement from the people who doubted her most felt surreal. Thank you, she managed, but I couldn't have done it alone. The king has also earned recognition, another advisor interrupted. For the first time in generations, we have a ruler who cares openly about his people, who uses his power to protect rather than just to maintain distance. Kael, standing beside Elara, looked uncomfortable with the praise, but he didn't deny it. The council session continued with discussions of rebuilding and restructuring, but the tone had changed. Instead of fighting every suggestion, the advisors worked with Elara and Kael. It felt like progress. Real, tangible progress. That night, Elara collapsed in her chambers and didn't move for 12 hours. When she finally woke, she found Kael sitting beside her bed again. This was becoming a habit. How long this time? She asked. Just overnight. You're getting better at not dying. He offered her water. The healers say you need at least a week of rest before you do anything magical again. The kingdom can survive without you for a week. He set the cup down. We've got this, Elara. You don't have to fix everything personally. She wanted to argue, but she was so tired. Okay, she said quietly. 1 week. Good. Kael stood to leave, then hesitated. There's something I need to tell you about the curse. Elira's heart jumped. Is it coming back? No, the opposite. He turned to face her fully. I've been monitoring myself, testing the limits like we planned, and I've discovered something. What? The curse isn't gone, but it's changed. He held up his hand and frost formed across his palm. It responds to fear now, specifically fear of loss. When I thought you were dying, when I was terrified of losing you, that's when the ice came back. Elara sat up slowly. So the trigger is still there, just different. Yes, which means... He stopped, struggling with the words. It means I can feel most things safely. Anger, joy, even affection. But deep love, the kind that makes you terrified of losing someone, that still triggers it. The implication hung between them. So if you actually fall in love with me, Elara said slowly, it could still kill you. Possibly, I don't know for sure. Kael's expression was conflicted. But I thought you should know before this goes any further. Elara processed that. They'd broken the worst of the curse. Kael could feel, could connect, could actually live. But the deepest form of love was still dangerous. She should have been devastated, should have felt like this was just another rejection. Instead, she felt oddly calm. Do you want to stop? She asked. Stop whatever's growing between us before it gets to that point? Kael was quiet for a long moment. No, he said finally. I don't. Even knowing the risk, I don't want to go back to being alone. He met her eyes. But I won't blame you if you want to walk away. This isn't what you signed up for. Elara almost laughed. I signed up to marry a man who explicitly said he'd never loved me. This is actually an improvement. How is might die if I love you too much an improvement? Because at least now there's a possibility of love. She reached for his hand. Before, there wasn't even that. You were going to live and die without ever letting yourself feel anything real. Kael looked at their joined hands. You're not afraid? Terrified, Elara admitted. But I've been terrified since I got here. Hasn't stopped me yet. You're insane. Probably. She squeezed his hand. But so are you, for letting yourself care about the insane queen who keeps almost dying. Fair point. They sat together in comfortable silence. Outside, the kingdom continued its transformation. Inside, two people who'd been broken by different forces were slowly becoming whole. It wasn't a perfect solution. The curse still lingered in a new form. The kingdom still faced challenges, and neither of them knew if love would ultimately heal or destroy. But they were choosing to try anyway. Over the following months, the frozen kingdom transformed completely. The eternal winter became actual seasons, spring with its flooding challenges, summer with unprecedented growth, autumn with harvests no one knew how to process, villages that had been isolated for generations opened trade, the outer provinces gained representation in court, and slowly, painfully, the rigid power structures began to evolve. Not everyone adapted. Some people left, unable to cope with the changes. Others dug in their heels and fought every step. But the majority chose to try, chose hope over fear. And they chose to follow a queen who'd proven herself willing to sacrifice everything for people who'd once doubted her, and a king who'd learned that feeling was worth the risk. 6 months after breaking the curse, Elara stood in the great hall surrounded by representatives from every territory in the kingdom. The spring festival, the first in living memory, was in full swing. Kael found her standing alone by the window, watching the celebration. Tired of the party already? He asked. Just taking a moment. Elara smiled. A year ago I was collapsed in front of my pack, broken and humiliated. Now I'm here. Thinking about going back, rubbing their faces in your success? No. The realization felt freeing. I don't need to. They don't matter anymore. Kael stepped beside her. Over the past months, they'd grown closer, carefully, testing the boundaries of what was safe. They held hands regularly now, kissed occasionally, shared a bed sometimes, though more for comfort than passion. Always careful, always aware of the line they couldn't cross without risking everything. Do you regret it? Elara asked suddenly. Choosing me over the other king's offers? You chose me, remember? Kael's lips quirked. I just gave you the most honest option. You gave me the scariest option, and you took it anyway. He turned to face her fully. No, I don't regret it. Even with everything that's happened, all the chaos and danger and near-death experiences, I don't regret choosing you. Something warm bloomed in Elira's chest. Not quite love yet, but close. So close. I don't regret it either, she said softly. They stood together watching the celebration, and Elara felt the bond she'd created throughout the kingdom humming with life and connection. Felt the wellspring beneath them, powerful but peaceful. Felt the thread linking her to Kael, growing stronger every day. And she felt something else, a subtle shift in the curse's energy. Kael, she said slowly, I want to try something. That phrase always means trouble. Probably, she took his hand, but I think I figured something out about the curse, the way it's changed. What? It responds to fear of loss. Not love itself. Elara met his eyes. What if the trigger isn't actually deep feeling? What if it's the fear that comes with it? Kael's expression shifted to understanding. You think if I could love without fear, then maybe it wouldn't trigger at all. She squeezed his hand. We've been so focused on testing emotional boundaries, but we haven't tested love specifically. We've just been assuming it's still dangerous. Because everyone in my family who felt love died. Everyone who felt love while terrified of the curse died, Elara corrected. What if the fear was actually the problem? It was a theory, untested and potentially fatal if wrong. Kael studied her face. You want me to risk it. I want us to risk it, together. Elara's voice was steady. We've already established you can feel anger, joy, grief, all strongly, without freezing. We've rebuilt this entire kingdom on the premise that connection is possible. Why would love be different? Because it's the deepest connection, the most vulnerable. Exactly, which makes it the most terrifying. Elara stepped closer. But you're not the same person who started this marriage. You've learned to feel without the fear controlling you. Maybe that's enough. Kale was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled her closer until their foreheads touched. If this kills me, he said quietly, I need you to know it was worth it. Every moment, every feeling. You gave me an actual life, Elara, even if it's shorter than it could have been. It's not going to kill you. You can't know that. No, but I believe it. She pulled back slightly to meet his eyes. Do you trust me? Completely. Then let go of the fear just for a moment. Let yourself feel whatever you're feeling without worrying about the consequences. She could see him struggling. 30 years of conditioning didn't disappear overnight. The fear was ingrained deep as bone. But slowly, she felt it through their bond, Kyle releasing his grip on the terror that had defined his entire existence. And in that space, something else bloomed. Love. Real, deep, terrifying love. Elara felt it flood through their connection, overwhelming in its intensity. Felt Kale's genuine affection, his gratitude, his desperate desire to protect her mixed with the bone-deep fear of losing her. The temperature dropped. Frost spread across Kale's skin, racing toward his heart. But then it stopped. Because Elara grabbed that fear through their bond and absorbed it herself. Pulled it out of him, took the weight of it into her own heart. The frost retreated. Kyle gasped, his eyes wide. What did you— I took the fear, Elara said. She was shaking, the terror she'd absorbed making her heart race. The curse responds to your fear of loss, so I'm carrying it for you. That's not— you can't just— I can. She held him steady as he processed what had happened. My power creates bonds, Kyle. Transfers things between people. I can't break the curse completely, but I can take the part that triggers it, carry it for you. But then you'll be afraid of losing you, yes. Elara smiled through her own tears. But I don't have a curse. Fear won't kill me. It'll just make me human. Kale stared at her, and she watched understanding dawn. She'd found the loophole. The curse couldn't be broken, but it could be transferred, and transferred to someone it couldn't actually harm. You're terrifying, he said. I know. And brilliant. That too. And I love you. He said it clearly without hesitation. I love you, and it's not killing me. Elara felt tears spill over. I love you too. They kissed then, deep and real and completely unafraid. Around them, the party continued, oblivious to the miracle happening in the corner. A curse that had stood for 300 years, finally defeated not by destroying it, but by sharing its burden. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Kyle touched her face gently. The fear you took, he said. Is it bad? Horrible, Elara admitted. I'm terrified of losing you, of something going wrong, of this not being real. But you're still here. Always. She leaned into his touch. Fear is just part of love, the price of caring about someone. And you're worth the price. Even though I'm still emotionally stunted and terrible at this, especially because of that, Elara grinned. Someone has to teach you how to be a functional human. Might as well be me. They returned to the party together, hand in hand. And when Kyle smiled, genuinely smiled, warm and real, the entire court noticed. Whispers spread. Speculation grew. But neither Elara nor Kyle paid attention. They'd done the impossible, broken a curse that shouldn't have been breakable, saved a kingdom that was supposed to die, and found love in the last place anyone expected. In the months that followed, the kingdom continued to thrive. The seasons cycled properly for the first time in centuries. Trade flourished, and the people who'd once been isolated and afraid began to actually live. Elara never stopped carrying Kyle's fear of loss. It was a constant weight, a reminder that love wasn't free, but she bore it gladly, because the alternative was a world where he couldn't feel anything at all. And Kyle never stopped being amazed that someone would choose to carry that burden for him. That someone would look at a cursed king who'd offered her nothing and decide he was worth saving anyway. They weren't perfect. They fought sometimes, struggled with the weight of ruling, made mistakes, but they were real, and they were together. 1 year after Elara first arrived in the Frozen Kingdom, she stood in the same spot where she'd taken the bonding vow. But this time, the hall was warm. Sunlight streamed through windows that no longer showed endless winter. And this time, she wasn't alone. Kale stood beside her, not as a distant king, but as a partner. Together, they received representatives from all the surrounding kingdoms, including 3 particular kings who'd once offered her different futures. King Aldrich of the Golden Plains bowed respectfully. "Your Majesties, we've come to propose a formal alliance." King Theron of the Storm Coast nodded. "Your kingdom's transformation has been impressive. We'd like to be part of it." Even King Aldrich, who'd offered her wealth and status, looked at her with genuine respect. "You chose well," he said quietly. "Better than either of us could have offered." Elara smiled. "I chose truth. Everything else followed." The negotiations lasted for days, but the outcome was never in doubt. The Frozen Kingdom, now simply the Northern Kingdom, as winter was no longer its defining feature, would stand as an equal among the great powers. And the queen who'd been rejected as worthless became known as the woman who'd achieved the impossible. But Elara's favorite moment came later, in the quiet of their chambers. Kale pulled her close, no frost forming, no curse activating, just warmth and connection, and the terrifying, wonderful reality of being loved. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked. "Your old pack, the life you could have had if Darian hadn't rejected you." Elara thought about it seriously, then she smiled. "No. If he hadn't rejected me, I never would have left, never would have met you, never would have discovered what I'm actually capable of." She touched his face gently. "He thought he was destroying me, but he freed me instead. To come save a dying kingdom and its emotionally damaged king. Best decision I ever made." Kael kissed her forehead. "Even with all the fear you're carrying? Even with that?" Elara pulled him closer. "Because a heart that feels everything, joy, sorrow, love, fear, that's what it means to be alive. And I'd rather be terrified and alive with you than safely numb anywhere else." Outside their window, the northern lights danced across a sky that hadn't been visible for centuries. The wellspring's magic, integrated into the land, creating beauty instead of destruction. And inside, 2 people who'd been told they couldn't love or connect or feel had proven everyone wrong. Not because they were perfect, not because it was easy, but because they'd chosen each other, chosen truth over comfort, chosen to risk everything for the possibility of something real. The rejected mate and the frozen king, who together became the queen and king who melted a kingdom and proved that love, messy, terrifying, imperfect love, was always worth the risk.